Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Reincarnation Book Club. We're happy to have Joanne DiMaggio with us today, and I've known Joanne for at least 7 years, I think. When I first, in fact, the first workshop I ever attended was when your book Karma Can Be a Pain was coming out, and so it might even be a little bit longer than that. And really enjoyed that and have loved following your work ever since. And Joanne has been part of developing the Reincarnation Symposium. So we're kindred souls, you might say. And so we're happy to have her as our speaker tonight, talking about one of her many books, which is Karma Can Be a Real Pain. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll have Q&A. If you have any questions in between, if something comes up and you think about a question, you can put it in the chat so we don't forget about it, or write it down and then share it when we come to Q&A.
Okay. Well, hi, everyone, again. I'm Joanne DiMaggio. It's my pleasure to be here with you this evening. I've known about the Reincarnation Book Club. I always thought that was such a great idea. So I'm so happy to be a part of it tonight. We're going to talk tonight about physical karma. It's a big, big, big topic. And the reason I say that is because almost everybody has at one time or the other had a chronic condition pop up. It could be physical, it could be mental, and they haven't been able to successfully treat it with traditional medicine. So, they've gone to doctor after doctor, even using some maybe alternative methods of healing, and nothing has budged it. And so out of frustration, they start to think to themselves, I wonder if this condition is more than what's on the surface. Maybe it's past life related. Well, that was what one of my research projects set out to prove. But it was a project that I'd been thinking about for almost 30 years, really. When I looked back on it, Spirit had set the stage for it when I was right out of college. And it ended up being my first experience with physical karma, although at that time, I didn't know that that's what it was. So it started right out of college. I majored in early American history, and I had a professor, and some of you've heard this story, so forgive me for repeating it. But I had a professor who said to me, you have the most uncanny feel for the 18th century of any student I've ever had. And I sat back and I thought about it, and it was true, I did. So I decided that after college, I was going to make a trip to the East Coast. I was living in Chicago at the time. I was going to make a trip up the East Coast, start in Virginia, work my way all the way up to Massachusetts, and see what I had this uncanny feel for, right? Well, I didn't have to wait too long. When I got to Virginia, those of you who live here in Virginia know we have a multitude of historic sites, right? So I was making my rounds through them, and one in particular, I experienced a physical reaction to the place. I was only 21 years old. I was in perfect health, and luckily I had a friend from school that was with me. But I remember I couldn't breathe. I had heart palpitations. My legs felt like lead weights. I was trying to go up this ramp to the door, and I couldn't. I was holding on like this and pulling myself up. It was really disconcerting to feel that way. And after we left, I didn't feel it again in any other place that I visited, just this one particular place. And I thought for sure that I'd feel it in Massachusetts because I loved John Adams and Abigail Adams. And I really thought when I got to their house that I'd feel something. I didn't feel anything there. So this was really weird. So anyway, I came home, sort of forgot about it, lived an ordinary life. And then 1987 comes along, and here comes Out on a Limb by Shirley MacLaine. when I saw that, it reignited my passion for past life work. I had been fascinated by reincarnation as a teenager and as a young adult, but I didn't really professionally pursue it. I was just reading about it. So in the process of that, 1987 being this hallmark year for me, that's the year that I joined Edgar Cayce's ARE. That was the year that I started my own past life organization called Plexus. And so I started to interact a lot with leading past life therapists across the country, because I'd invite them to come and speak to our group. And then ARE, of course, would bring in the big name speakers, the Brian Weisses and people like that. And so I was sort of piggybacking on that. So in the process of that, I learned that I had, in fact, did have an 18th century life in Virginia. So there was the biggest part of the clue was right in front of me. So remembering my experience in 1971, I returned to Virginia in 1993. So that was the first time I had come back. And this was because I had a friend from Illinois who moved to Virginia, and I came out to visit her. So we went back to this place that I had this experience in, and this time it was much worse. I felt like I had a hot poker from a fireplace seared into the back of my spine, the very bottom. I was crippled with pain. I had not felt that kind of pain in my entire life. I almost asked my friend to take me to the hospital. It was so severe. I don't know how I got back to Chicago. I have no idea how I got on that plane, but I did. And then I went and saw chiropractors and, regular doctors, had x-rays done. Nobody could find anything wrong with me, but I was in agony for months and months. Finally, at one of my programs, I had invited David Roel, who is an Akashic librarian. He channels an Akashic librarian. And he came and he said, I told him about this pain. And then he said, well, that's easy. You were hit in the back with that fireplace poker. And when you walked back in that room, you accessed that energy. And the pain that you felt then, you felt again now. And I do have that unfortunate ability to walk across. If I had been in a place before and I had deposited a lot of emotion there, I can pick up on it again. So, okay, that was my very first entree into physical karma. So I became a past life therapist in the early 1990s. And over the years, I've witnessed a lot of healing that's been done through past life work. And I also witnessed trends. And by trends, I mean, you see this, your clientele come in with the exact same issue. And several years before I started doing this research project, I was getting a lot of clients coming in with chronic physical conditions. And they wanted to know, is this something from a previous life? So the seed got planted for me to do a research project. I love doing research projects. All of my books are based on research projects because I really want the people that I work with to tell their story rather than you hearing it from me. So I've created a PowerPoint that I want to share with you because I've put together some of the highlights from that research project and some of the more interesting case studies that I've done that I think you'll find really interesting. So let me indulge here. Can you see that, everybody? I hope.
No, can't see it.
Can't? I've done this how many times? There you go. Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so this is the book that we're going to be. I'm pulling some excerpts from. Now, when I knew Edgar Cayce, those of you who don't know who he is probably the most renowned psychic of the 20th century. He founded the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach. And I became a student of his in 1987. Now, I knew that Mr. Cayce had done thousands of readings on people's physical conditions. But for some reason, I couldn't find them online. This is one of his quotes: "Whatsoever a soul soweth, that shall it also reap," which is the perfect definition of karma. All right, but we're going to apply that to a physical condition. Now, at the time that I was doing my research, ARE was phasing out the library's card catalog. They were obviously going digital, and I'm card catalogs, and they still had it. So I went and looked, and sure enough, they had everything listed from acne to venereal disease. So I had a lot of that to serve as a foundation for my work. And also I had colleagues who talked about spontaneous healings, but I hadn't seen that in my practice. But I believe nothing was impossible. And after revisiting my own experience, I knew the idea of a spontaneous healing via a past life regression was a true possibility. So then in 2001, it was proven to me when I was doing research for my second book, Your Soul Remembers. One of the volunteers I had for that project's name was Frank. He came to me and went to a past life as Cleo in Pompeii, so 79 AD. And what I think is interesting is that a lot of the case studies that I had went back 1,000 years or more. And so it just shows you how, you have a condition, or you develop a karmic issue in a previous lifetime that initiates the chronic condition you have in this life, but you sometimes wait 1,000 years or two before you deal with it. So in this case, Frank had waited, almost 2,000 years. So Frank was Cleo. Cleo was a young teenage boy who was being trained as someone who could look into the fire and tell the future. But Cleo was also very arrogant, and it was like the little boy that cried wolf. So whenever he would try to make a prediction, people go, you're full of yourself, right? So of course, what does he see? He sees the destruction of Pompeii. He tries to share that with everybody. People kind of just blew him off and said, get out of here, and that's not going to happen. That's incredible. And so what happens? Mount Vesuvius erupts, Pompeii is destroyed, and as the gases are coming in, the ash is coming in, Cleo felt so guilty, because he knew if he had been more sincere, maybe more people would have believed him. So he went into a cave with other people, and there he suffocated to death. All right, so now we have him in 2011. And, he relayed the past life to me and didn't say anything about a physical condition, because this particular project wasn't about physical conditions. It was about soul writing, which is a written form of meditation that I teach. And I do add it on to my past life work in many cases. So with Frank, he writes, we're going to do the soul writing together. And I said, is there anything else about this past life that you want to explore or understand or ask a question about? And so the first line of Frank's soul writing was asthma, the result of suffocation or something like that. So unbeknownst to me, in this life, he had asthma, and he didn't know where it came from or why. And when he discovered that that's what it was from, it disappeared. He never had another case of asthma after that. The reason it waited till this lifetime is because in this life, Frank's doing the work, almost the same work that Cleo is doing. He's a very prolific writer. He's written many, many books. And he talks to groups of people. And so Spirit was saying to him, don't be full of yourself again, because this stuff's important and people really need to believe you. So that's what that's why that condition arose. So his story is typical of experiences of people that are seeking relief through regression. So I started thinking about this, and I thought, I wonder what other past life experts or people in the leading in the field had to say about it. This is a quote that I found from an article in Venture Inward, which is ARE's magazine, by George Schwimmer. He said, a physical symptom is indeed a message about a core issue or lesson. The pain in the past life wounds must ultimately be healed, of course, but the core issue we found, examined, and dealt with in a positive healing way. So shortly after Your Soul Remembers came out, I got a message in my meditation and also from intuitive readers that I should look into medical intuition and I should incorporate that into my work. I wasn't convinced that this is something I should do. I didn't resonate to it. I didn't feel like this was my calling or that I had the talent and skill to do something like that. But okay, I thought I'll go ahead and I'll look into it. So ARE was having a conference on medical intuition with Dr. Norm Shealy, and he talked about the connection between illness and karma. And I almost couldn't believe what I heard him say, but this is basically what his quote is. This is from his website. He said, in my experience, all significant illnesses and accidents in this life are the result of unfinished business from a previous life. Anger, guilt, anxiety, and depression often are triggered by an event in this life, which triggers the subconscious memory left over from a similar event in a past life. So I thought, wow, this is a medical doctor saying this. It really kind of threw me. I thought, if he believes this, there must, because traditional medicine, they wouldn't even, most of them will not even consider this possibility. So but he wasn't the only respected physician that had that opinion. Dr. William McGarry, who was the former medical director at the ARE Clinic and director of the Medical Research Division of the Edgar Cayce Foundation, said, I've come to the conclusion that most of the serious long-term degenerative diseases are karmic in their nature. So based on that, everything was in place for my research project to begin. So I wanted to call out for some volunteers to see if they had I asked for people who had a chronic condition. I said, would you like to participate in the research project to see if your problem is rooted in a prior lifetime? So I had 50 volunteers that I worked with over the course of a little over a year. I only could put 23 in the book. That was my publisher's decision because he said the book would be way too big and it would cost too much money. So you get 23 out of the 50. 18 were women, 5 were men. They ranged in age from 34 to 74. They went from 5th century BCE to the 20th century AD, and they were in every country across the world. The conditions that they came in with were arthritis, diabetes, heart disease, liver and kidney problems, weight and digestive issues, head-related concerns, foot, leg, and back pain, sexual karma, drug and alcohol abuse, and mental and emotional disorders. So I created a research project and I structured it so that in the very beginning, I did a body scan. I was looking for 3 things when I did the body scan. I was looking for sensitivity, discomfort, and if they had any birthmarks. So that was all done without going into hypnosis. I just was relaxing one part of their body. When I got to that part, I said, tell me if you have any sensitivity, discomfort, or birthmarks. Unusual sensitivities around parts of your body may indicate a body karma. People that have an aversion to having anything pointed at their eyes or their head may have had a past life head injury. scarves or clothing that fits snugly around your neck. Could have been, and you don't like that, that could have been a neck injury. Any kind of overprotectiveness about a particular part of your body is a clue. And then, of course, the question about birthmarks came from Dr. Ian Stevenson's groundbreaking work. He researched, unearthed evidence that suggested that physical as well as emotional conditions could be transferred from one lifetime to another. Now, he worked with children and he drew special attention to birthmarks. And his research indicated that physical characteristics, such as a birthmark or a deformity, might be carried over from a past life to the present. So in other words, people that may have or on their side, could be that they were stabbed there. So the body does show various clues to a past life injury. So regression specifically to the life that was the origin of that chronic condition they came with was the hallmark of this research project. And in the regression, we really focused a lot on what were their last thoughts when their soul left their body. And the reason I did that is because I had a woman come to me who had head to toe psoriasis. She wanted to know what's the source of the psoriasis. She went back to a past life in the Old West in which she was a call girl. And when I asked her, what were your last thoughts as your soul left your body? She said, I don't want to be touched anymore. And so what does she do? She manifests a skin condition in this life in which nobody wants to touch her. I'd say pretty neat. It is pretty neat, but not when you're suffering like that by any means. So the obvious question now, what is physical karma? Let's define it. Marianne Woodward, who wrote the book Scars of the Soul, Holistic Healing in the Edgar Cayce reading, said that physical karma is a manifestation of karmic law taking place at a visible or physical level within the human body. Now, Harold J. Riley was a world-renowned physiotherapist and a pioneer in the field of massage. He owned and operated the famed Riley Institute in New York City for more than 30 years. He was a close friend of Edgar Cayce's, and he worked with the Cayce remedies throughout his career. So addressing the topic of physical karma, Dr. Riley said, if a man continues to dissipate for an entire life without taking corrective measures, you would not expect, would you, to see him emerging in another life with a brand new body, perfect in all parts and functioning as if it had never been misused. Then, if you believe in reincarnation with its law of karma, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, as you sow, so shall you reap, you must include the body in that plan. Dr. Roger Woolger is someone that I greatly admire, and I do pattern much of my work after his research. He was a psychologist, a lecturer, and author specializing in past life regression. And he said, both past life research and past life therapy have now collected an impressive array of evidence to show that these old traumas inherited through the first level of the subtle body consistently re-imprint in the living body as rashes, deformities, birthmarks, weaknesses in certain limbs, and organic disorders such as a weak bladder, a weak heart, gynecological problems, and so on. So there's considerable evidence that we manifest a condition in this life to help us resolve an issue from a past life. Now, in some cases, that could be a lesson that you're learning, or it could be for the benefit of those around you. Cayce talked a lot about the physical karma of a child that really was intended more as a lesson for the parents and others who had a close relationship with him or her. I'm sure many of you know about Dr. Michael Newton. He was really a trailblazer in the area of life between life. And his comment here corroborates what I just shared with you. He said, as souls, we choose our bodies for a reason. Living in a damaged body does not necessarily have to involve a karmic debt we're paying off because of past life responsibility for an injury to someone else. This choice can involve a learning path to another type of lesson. So, all right, this is all well and good, but the ultimate goal of doing past life work for physical karma is healing. And Mr. Cayce gives us the good news that there are, in truth, no incurable conditions. You just have to really, truly believe. So, what I'd like to do now is share with you a couple of the memorable sessions that I had during my research project, to show you a few of the areas that we delved into and the difference that it made in the lives of the people who experienced the regression. So I'm finding this according to the Arthritis Foundation, over 50 million Americans have arthritis, making it the #1 cause of disability in the country. Now, despite how common it is, the Arthritis Foundation admits it's a disease that is, quote, not well understood. So if traditional medicine is saying that it's not well understood, imagine if you add the metaphysical component to it. Yet it is the karmic approach to this crippling disease that makes perfect sense. One of the underlying reasons for an individual to suffer the pain and joint mutilation brought about by this disease can be rooted sometimes in just their attitude. Not that they did something to somebody or somebody did something to them, it's their attitude. Something that Edgar Cayce warned about repeatedly in the readings. Now, some of my arthritic clients admit to being rigid in their thinking, unable to show any flexibility when confronted by someone or something that challenges their beliefs. Many times, as in this first case I'm going to share, we're going to look at, it contains, it's linked to actions that happened in a prior life. So we're going to look at Gary. Now, Gary spent 22 years in the United States Navy in active duty and then 20 years as a defense contractor. He came to my study and he was complaining of arthritis, but he said it was only in his thumbs. When we did the body scan, he brought up the memory of a wound in the back of his thigh, as well as wounds over his digestive organs and a punctured right lung. He recalled injuries to both his thumbs and said his right thumb was tingling. We went back to a life when he was a 35-year-old man named John, born in 1832 in Virginia. He was married with 2 children, and the significant event in that life was during an early Civil War battle. He was an officer in the 32nd Virginia Infantry with men under his command. This is how he described one of the skirmishes. I'm on horseback. My saber is drawn during a skirmish. I struck the hand of my Union cavalry opponent and severed his thumb. We would fire our pistols first, and then we would resort to sabers. I tried to hit the hands of opponents rather than the body so they can't ride, hold guns, or wield a saber. He went on to say he felt a saber cut on his left thigh, which he brought up during the body scan. And then he died from a gunshot wound to his chest, which also came up in the body scan. Okay, so in Gary's case, we see an example of physical karma that's a direct reflection of a past life act. Well, John drew his saber and he struck the hand of his opponent, severing his thumb. So in this life, Gary has arthritis in his thumb joints only. I asked him if he saw a correlation between the two, because that's really where the healing takes place, when you can understand and recognize the pattern that's repeating itself. And he said, yes, I do feel that the pain in both my right and left thumb joints are due to my past life practice of intentionally injuring the thumbs and fingers of my opponents while fighting them with sabers. At present, I have experienced arthritis in no other part of my body, though I am now a 68-year-old disabled veteran. I feel this is a karmic debt I am now facing due to my past life's view of how I would fight, intentionally wounding or disabling opponents with saber strokes aimed at their fingers and hands. Where I could, I would spare their lives, but maim them in such a manner. There were many men I did this to. At times, the others I rode with in my cavalry unit did not agree with me as to how I fought. Most of them wanted to kill the Yankee invaders outright with any means available to them. Now, after our session, his condition remained about the same, but he was enthused about the healing potential of the past life regression. He said it would be nice if medical science and organized religion would be more accepting of past life experiences and of karmic debt incurred by our past life actions. Yeah, nice indeed. This is one I can relate to. Again, another one. Foot, leg, and back pain. So who among us hasn't complained about pain in our feet, our legs, our back? This was a common complaint among the volunteers who came to the project. But the most compelling session in this category, and by the way, that's one of the Cayce readings. Those of you who aren't familiar with Cayce, 5295-1. 5295 is the number of the person getting the reading. They wanted to safeguard everybody's anonymity, so they just assigned a number to it. -1 means it's the first reading. So that's one of the readings Cayce gave. But I wanted to share with you one of the volunteers who came to me. Her name is Emma. At the time, she was a 65-year-old healthcare provider who described having sciatica-like symptoms on the left side of her body, especially in her back, her hip, and her leg. And during her body scan, she said she felt a sharp pain in her left shin and a sciatica feeling in her ligaments from the left hip down. Now remember this because it's important. Sciatica feeling in her ligaments from the left hip down. Now, Emma was interesting for a couple of reasons. First, I had heard of colleagues of mine who reported that they had clients who reverted to speaking in the language of their past life aspects. So instead of speaking when you're interviewing them, instead of speaking English, if they happened to be German in that past life, they were speaking German back to the past life regressionist. That's called, I hope I say this right, xenoglossy. But I never experienced that. In all the years that I've done this work, that never happened. Now, Emma was about as close as I got to that because throughout the session, she spoke in a very strong French accent. And she struggled to find the right words in English, even though her English was her first language in this life. So anyway, Emma saw herself as Marie Corbien, a prima ballerina. She spoke about her costumes and her slippers that she prized. She lived in Paris, talked about her elegant apartment and her sparse diet. When I asked her, what's the significant event in Marie's life, she said, and she said this with a French accent, and I'm not going to do a French accent for you, but she said, I was very naughty. I tripped someone. I am scared she'd take my place. I am jealous. She's very good, and I fear her ability, so I'm causing her to fall, and it's done. I've done a very bad thing. I am very sorry. Somehow I put something in the way, like a broomstick. I tried to do it so no one noticed. She's very good in the ballet company, and I thought so many times how to do this. I planned it for a while. Now, she said, how mean. She knew if she did wrong. She said, I really feel bad, mean, small, really jealous. Somehow I put it where she tripped. I planned it so no one knows, but I know. I know, it's done. She can no longer dance. A break her upper leg. Same place that Emma was experiencing the sciatic pain. So Marie never gave it another thought. She later married a nobleman named Jacques, which is not a good idea to marry a nobleman in the French Revolution. But she did. They retired to the country, and you can guess it, they both died at the guillotine. As part of the regression, I asked her, who in Marie's life is in your life now? Thinking maybe Jacques would reappear. But we were both in for a surprise because she said her daughter now in this life was the dancer that she crippled. And she said they've had a troubled relationship since her daughter was a teenager. And she said she's never gotten her approval or her acceptance of her daughter. She said rejection, payback, judgment. She judges me very well. Maybe that is why she rejects me in this life. So Emma got a double whammy, didn't she? She was experiencing physical pain in the exact same location that she caused the pain to that rival ballerina, and she was experiencing the pain of the karmic relationship that she has with her daughter as a result of the circumstances that she set up when she was Marie. But there's a happy ending for Emma. In this life, she's embraced the law of grace. The theme of eliminating competition that was so prevalent in Marie's life was not repeated in Emma's life. And while Marie may have come across as selfish and self-centered, as Emma, she's just the opposite. She's selfless, kind, and humble, non-confrontational, and pursuing a career in the healing arts. So she's very much in service to others. So it's a transcending experience. And by the way, several months after I did this study, Jacques did reappear. Emma lost her husband in this life, and suddenly became close to her neighbor. And as it turns out, her neighbor was Jacques. The two of them, when I used to see them, they were so cute together. Oh my gosh. It was just a beautiful, beautiful story. Okay, moving on. This Cayce reading was given to a 52-year-old woman who was losing her hearing. So migraines, allergies, vision issues, deafness, voice issues, throat and neck problems are just a few of the maladies associated with physical karma involving the head. So head-related issues can be extremely painful in this life as much as they were in a prior life. And that was certainly the case with Naomi. So when Naomi came to my research project, she was 64. She was a retired associate vice president and university administrator. And she initially came in complaining of chronic arthritis in her neck and spine. But then she told me that a few months earlier, she had blacked out when she had the flu and she suffered a concussion. So she came to the project because she saw repeating patterns of head trauma in her life. So her regression took her back to 5 BCE in either Egypt or Greece. She was a female in her 20s named Aurelia. She lived in what she said felt like a palace. It was a large building. It had stone floors and thick walls with cutout windows. She felt she was in a privileged position, but didn't want to claim it. She didn't feel a connection to anyone else who was there, saying that when she saw herself eating, she was alone or at one end of the table. She described herself as being apart emotionally and disconnected and said, "It's as if I am somehow set aside in importance." She had been identified as someone vastly different from her peers, and that resulted in jealousy and envy. And as it turned out, it evolved into the significant event in that life, which left a karmic imprint on her soul. And that event, like Emma's, came out of jealousy, except in Naomi's case, it was jealousy directed at her. So she was still in her 20s when this happened, and she said she clearly remembered being deliberately pushed down a curved stone stairway. She didn't see who came up behind her, but she said she felt her body slamming against the hard stone, resulting in a fatal head injury. Now, karmically, this is played out in Naomi's life in several ways, including the pattern of being repeatedly hit from behind, feeling separated from others, and not knowing how to be her authentic self without incurring unwanted jealousy. In her work environment, for example, she said she felt apart from those she supervised and those who supervised her. There was always that feeling of separateness. So that was one issue she was dealing with. The other was the recurrent issue of having people doing something to her behind her back, and as a result, being hit and having a head injury. The whiplash injuries to her neck occurred while at red lights. The last one was someone running a red light and totaling her car on the right side. So it was a part of a pattern of multiple rear-end collisions. Another example was when a male coworker pushed her from behind to get her out of the way when they were racing out of a building during the Monroe, Virginia earthquake we had some years ago. When she was ill and she passed out, she hit her head. She endured both a significant concussion and another neck injury. So the pattern was she's minding her own business and getting surprise attacks as she innocently went about her business. Now, many of the souls from Naomi's life are in her life now. So the pattern kept repeating itself until she was able to identify and recognize what the pattern was. And after she had time to reflect, she said, I set myself apart by not embracing the position or allowing myself to be in authority. This is the same as in this life, able and capable, but holding back so others will like me. It didn't always work. So after our session, she said her condition remained, but that it was improving. She was using several different healing modalities to work on it, and that she was grateful for the experience. We'll move on. Another issue I can relate to, weight and digestive issues. This is the physical karma that actually concerned the greatest number of volunteers in my study. This is a Cayce reading. Somebody asked him, what is the cause of the body's dislike for eating fish, fowl, game, and certain meats? And he answered, from the condition that's existed in that as a Norseman when he lived on these alone. So all he got to eat was fish, fowl, and game, and certain meats. And in this life, he can't stomach it. Get some pizza. Dr. Edith Fiore is a renowned past life therapist and clinical psychologist. In her study, she found that eating disorders of many of her clients were connected to a past life. So she wrote, I now find that almost all patients with chronic weight excess of 10 pounds or more have had a lifetime in which they either starved to death or suffered food deprivation for long periods. So Cayce had a lot to say about this as well. He did a reading for a 14-year-old boy and revealed that his inclination toward digestive issues resulted from his indulgence in rich foods during his French and Persian incarnations. He did another reading for a 17-year-old female student who in a past life had made fun of people who were overweight. So now she's the one struggling with her own weight and exercise issues. So you see, it can also be, like I mentioned earlier, it could be an attitude problem. I'd like to share with you about Louise. She came to the study wanting to know the source of her low self-esteem and why she repressed herself with food. In an earlier session that we had together that had nothing to do with the research project, she went back to a Chinese life where she said her tongue had been cut out and she was left to die of starvation. Her last thoughts then were, fat people live longer. Imagine having that message going on and on in your mind. Interestingly, when we did the body scan, she reported seeing a bear in her mind's eye. And the bear asked her what her goals were by saying, are you going to express your anger or keep eating it? That was a big clue to what she was going to uncover in the regression. So now that regression led her to 1792, Canterbury, England. She was a 47-year-old noble woman, named Elizabeth. She was a woman of power and wealth, dedicated and dutiful to her position, but she was full of herself. The significant event occurred after dinner one evening. She was betrayed by 3 women, one of whom was her mother in this life, who stabbed her in the back and stomach. Her last thoughts were of betrayal and of not being protected in her own home. In this life, she suffered from low self-esteem and attributes that to her family. She said her family in this life destroyed her confidence. They didn't protect her, and she felt as if she was a scapegoat. She said it was at the family dinner table that her father was most brutal to her. In her words, she said, I gagged on food when I was singled out at the dinner table and being yelled at. Then she added, when I sweep my anger or the anger of others around me under the carpet, so to speak, by eating it, eventually the carpet starts to bulge. What do I do with this? I eat it. No self-esteem to stop. So why didn't she defend herself at the dinner table? She said because subconsciously she remembered that knife to her back and she didn't dare make a move. So I found it interesting during her body scan that she indicated agitation in her stomach area, and she added, digestion is where I process life. And then when we got to the regression, she said, my digestion keeps trying to process the inequities. So the fact that Elizabeth was knifed in the gut had a lot to do with her present condition. Since Elizabeth was knifed shortly after her meal, Louise believed she must have internalized the idea that if she was still eating, it wasn't time to be postpone the inevitable. So she just kept eating. Now, Louise is a shamanic healer, so she was able to work on her issues on her own. And she gained insights and thoughts on how her past life could be healed. She said this was a significant past life that released her family members and some others from karmic behavior in this lifetime as she mastered the lessons from that regression. While her eating habits did not change completely in the month following the regression, she did admit that they had improved substantially. Emotional and mental disorders was an area I really didn't want to get into with my study. I didn't want to get into drug and alcohol abuse either, but I had people who came to me, and so I did include it. This is a quote from Dr. Fiore, which I have a typo in. I can see I meant to say, my patients have been amazed to find that some recurring nightmares are actually flashbacks to experiences lived in previous lives. Now, I want to tell you about Irene. Irene's husband called me. I was at the end of this research project. I don't know how he found out about it, but he called me and he said to me, I really want to get my wife in this study. And I said, well, I'm already finished with all my research. But he was so sincere and I felt the need to include her. So I did. She was 71 at the time. She was a former psychiatric nurse. And he thought that she was having night terrors. And he thought that those dreams were coming from a past life in a concentration camp because they contained elements of torture, sexual abuse, being badly beaten, being a servant, seeing babies and children abused. And the night terrors were happening on a regular basis, and he was concerned because it was elevating her heart rate, and she had AFib after coming out of chemotherapy. So she regressed to a life as Mary George, but she did not go to the concentration camp. She went to 1921 in Bristol, England. And the significant event in that life was that her mother sold her when she was 14 years old to a brothel, and she ultimately became a prostitute. Now, why did she think she was in a concentration camp? Why was her husband so convinced? Well, the life that Mary George led in Bristol, England was similar to what she may have experienced had she been in a concentration camp. So Mary George in Bristol wore rags. She lived in a filthy house. There was nothing on the floor, just floorboards. Her younger baby, I don't know if it was a boy or a girl, was left in a drawer and was always wet. Her parents were abusive. She got sent out to run errands in the winter with no coat. There were no sheets on the bed, just an old blanket. And at 14, she sold to a man who ran a brothel. She was made to work in the kitchen at first and then as a prostitute. And then at 36, she was told she was too old. They sent her away, and then she died at the age of 40. But lo and behold, in Irene's case, after the regression, guess what? She had a spontaneous healing. She had no more nightmares after our session. They ended. Poof. And Irene and her husband came to my book launch. He had tears in his eyes, and he said to me, he said, she hasn't had a single nightmare or night terrors since the session with you. We can't thank you enough. And I think I could speak on behalf of other souls who are doing the same work that I'm doing. And I know that Carol knows this. There's nothing more humbling than to hear something like that. And that's when you know that, the value of this work, there's no price tag on it, because it's impacting people's lives on such a very deep, deep level. I wanted to mention about the liver and kidney conditions. Cayce says it's not merely a physical condition, but it reverts to the disturbance the entity brought to others because of their beliefs, faiths, or activities. A reading he gave in 1942 to the parents of an 11-year-old boy who went to Cayce to find out about his bedwetting. This started when he was 2, and now a sibling had also joined him in doing this. The parents thought he was reverting to baby habits. No, the sibling was coming into the family. So now the parents thought, oh, now there's a baby, so now the older one is reverting to being a baby, so that he wouldn't feel that he had been replaced. He was put under psychiatric care until he was 4, and again from the ages of 6 to 8, but the condition persisted. So this is why Cayce said, well, his condition is not merely a physical condition, but reverts to this. In a past life, he said the boy had been a minister who condemned children to ducking because of their ability to see, hear, or experience voices from other realms. Now, he was the one experiencing the ducking through that wedding. So in addition to the case studies that I've shared with you now, I've also had individuals come to me with diabetes, with sexual issues, with drug and alcohol abuse. And their stories are all very fascinating and hard for me to pick. So if you're interested in reading about them, they are in my book. So the question then becomes, can chronic conditions heal after a past life regression? The answer is yes. If one comes face to face with their past, accepts responsibility for seeing the karmic patterns, and more importantly, is willing to work through them. So out of the 23 people that I outlined in the book, 4 of them experienced a complete healing. Their condition just vanished, and they didn't have to deal with it anymore. 7 of them said their condition improved substantially. 8 said their condition went unchanged, but their perspective changed. 2 of them said their condition got worse, and they had to go and seek traditional medical treatment. And I think that's because they waited too long before we uncovered the condition. And by then, it had already done a lot of damage. And then 2 could not be classified because they came to the project, they were already healed. They just wanted to know where all of this came from. So whether they were completely healed or not, to me, isn't the issue, because it's the perspective that matters the most. So of those 8 that said their condition was unchanged, but their perspective changed, having your perspective change about a condition that you're dealing with is healing unto itself, to me. So I think it was a big success. So what's the value of using past life regression to uncover the origin of chronic conditions? Garrett Oppenheim, in his article, A Karmic Case of Polio, said, I've come to look on my handicap as a gift, enabling me to understand the afflictions of others, to enlarge my horizons, and to become, I hope, a better person. So karma can be a real pain, but lucky for us, there is a cure. This is my contact information. I would love to hear from you if you're interested in having a past life session for physical karma. I certainly can arrange that. these are some of the other books that I've written. Soul writing is really the work that I did on my thesis for my master's degree. And I've since trademarked that name and I do teach it. Soul writing is basically a written form of meditation. It's just highly transformational. There's almost nothing you can't ask that won't be answered by spirit. Soul, Your Soul Remembers is the follow-up to that. It's showing how you can access past life information using the soul writing. I did it to myself again. This is where we looked at case studies of, we did regressions and then people went to their pre-life planning session. It's basically the work that Michael Newton did. I found some differences in my research than in his, and that's presented in there. And then my last book, Edgar Cayce and the Unfulfilled Destiny of Thomas Jefferson Reborn, tells the story of this little baby born Cayce's secretary, Gladys Davis. And Gladys brought the baby to Cayce when he was 2 days old because the doctor said he wasn't going to live long. Cayce did a reading on that baby boy at 2 days old. And in the reading said he was the reincarnation of both Thomas Jefferson and Alexander the Great, and made a prediction that that soul could do for the world what Jefferson did for this country. Well, obviously he never did that. And so the book examines why. It really talks a lot about free will and how it doesn't matter what you may have the most lofty, prophecy about who you are and what you're going to do, but you still are in control and you can still say, no, I'm not doing that. And that pretty much was the case with this. So Thomas passed away in May at 86. I was very, very sad to lose him. We've been friends for many years, been in many past lives together, so I'm sure I'll see him again. But still, it didn't matter. I was still heartbroken because, and it wasn't so much the Jefferson life that was important to him. It was really the fact that he was with Mr. Cayce. That's what it really was all about for him. So it gives me some comfort to know he's back with Mr. Cayce and Gladys and all the folks from that time that he loved so dearly. So I look forward to seeing him on the other side. And I promised him in our pre-life planning session that I'd write this book, so I did. So anyway, thank you so much for your attention, for listening so kindly to me. If you have any questions now, I'm happy to answer them for you.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
My name is Debbie, by the way.
Hi, Debbie.
I did have a past life regression, and I had a sore throat, sore throat, chronic, since I was born. And when I finished that past life regression, I was healed.
There you go.
I used to have 3 times this episode of infection my entire life since I was born. And then 5 years ago, when I had this past life, I haven't had anything. And then I heard you saying that you lost your friend. I just lost my best friend as well. He was my very best friend a year ago. And since last month, my sore throat came back.
Oh, interesting.
That's very, very interesting. Yes. And I've been taking several antibiotics and it's not a healing. And I have pus, I have the whole symptom. So very, very unusual what's happening. And I know something is there. So I'm going to contact you and we're going to do something about this because I know it's all energetic and we need to find out what's going on. I need to find out.
You feel like it has something to do with your friend who passed?
Yes. Yes. And
But
I lost my
I'm sorry.
I lost my entire family as well for for inheritance. Since my mom passed away, the whole family went down the hill. So I believe is my structure. That is, I lost my structure, let's say like that, and my best friend. So
Mhm.
so that's my story.
Together, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Debbie. I appreciate that.
I have a
You're-
comment too.
Sure. Hi,
This
Carol.
would make such good sense to me. I had a spinal cord trauma, and I say trauma because nothing happened to me. I was not injured or anything, and it just went. I had to have surgery. And it all happened while I was caregiving for my husband, and then he died 3 months later. So there's got to be some past life correlation to this whole thing. That's the only thing that makes any sense to me anyway. So I probably should contact you too and see what we can find out. I did have one past life regression, and quite honestly didn't get very far.
Why do you say that? Were you just getting
Um,
blank? Or,
I just felt like I saw a previous life, but it was nothing special. You know, yes, it was a previous life, but it didn't give me any answers to anything.
oh, okay. Okay.
So,
Yeah. Well, I think it really depends on the therapist that you're working with and the direction that you're going in. And I always do an intake in which we chat first, and I find out, kind of what's going on. And I don't interfere though. Spirit just will take you on that journey,
right.
And show you what you need to see.
Mhm.
Take the life that's most impacting you and show you what it is you need to see, and then draw the correlation. Sometimes it's right there in front of you and you can't see it. You
True.
need to step back and have somebody else that can see what are the similarities, what are the behavior patterns that are going on from one life to the other. What did you bring in with you? You didn't
Mhm.
finish it, right? It's some unfinished business, and you decided you're going to work on it now. Just like when I mentioned about Frank going in Pompeii, that's a long time to wait to deal with asthma, I think, but that happens more times than not. So yeah, I'm sure the answers are there somewhere.
Okay, well, thank you for your
Sure.
talk. Very
Thank you.
interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else have a question or a comment?
My sciatica has been like a total disaster. I've been doing a whole bunch of energetic stuff, Reiki, and that was recent. And I think is my whole structure really. So this is another issue that I want to try to solve. And I believe that's from past life regression as well. Some past life that I had, I saw very quick in another past life regression session that I had, but I couldn't complete. It was something very fast. So definitely we can solve this issue.
Okay. Yeah, I can sympathize with you about the sciatica because I get that from time to time, and that's excruciatingly painful. It really is.
Yeah, I stretch all day long. It's awful.
And my heart goes out to you. Well, thank you for sharing that, Debbie.
Thank you.